What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, October 7th, 2016. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room ready to answer the phones. Couple of quick program notes here. The lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3. That's the good news. The bad news is I'm unable to do my radio show Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. There are going to be replays and best of shows, and I have something come up that's a conflict. I can't reschedule it, and it needs taken care of. So I will be updating the website as usual, but I'm unavailable for the broadcast, but we'll be back live on Thursday. So everybody hold your breath, and we'll get through this whole thing. Now then, getting into the news, there's a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, the top news today is still Hurricane Matthew. It's down to a Category 3, and but it's still causing a lot of damage. There's a lot of storm surge from this thing. And again, if you are still in the path of the oncoming storm, please take it seriously. This is a situation in which you should err on the side of caution, and I understand there were some people who refused the evacuation orders, and if you are foolish enough to do that, you need to understand the first responders can't get to you if you get into trouble. So I've seen a lot of hurricanes out here. I've been through a couple of hurricanes, been through the eye of a hurricane, and it's not something to take lightly. This isn't a disaster film. This is real life, and so please take all appropriate precautions there. We're starting to get aerial footage out of Haiti. Those poor people, if they haven't suffered enough between the earthquake and the Clintons and everything else, just devastation all across the island. And yes, Bill Clinton's already out there asking for donations to the Clinton Foundation to help the poor people of Haiti. And yes, let's see. Getting questions here. Yeah, we're out there. All right. Now, bizarrely enough, over on Twitter, followers of Black Lives Matter are out there talking about how they're going to go on looting sprees as soon as the storm is past. We're going to go and loot the white neighborhoods. I need a new TV and a new iPhone. Well, I got a news flash with you. Probably those people took their iPhones with them, but it's not a very good image. And, of course, the politicians are taking advantage of this any way that they can. Hillary's out there saying it's not Mother Nature, blame mankind. It's your fault. We've got the hurricanes because you won't pay a carbon tax and you won't live reduced lifestyle the way we tell that you ought to. We'll get into that aspect of it a little bit further into the show here. But I couldn't help but remember not too long ago there was this whole wave across the religion biz in this country of all these pastors and preachers and these TV ministries out there saying that God will punish America with disasters if we don't support Israel. And we found a video, and David Barton is out there saying that if we don't support Israel, the wrath of God will come on down. So here's my problem with all of that. We just gave Israel $38 billion with a B, and we get Hurricane Matthew. Now, how does David Barton explain that? Just a little postscript I thought was worth putting in there. All right, getting back to the more serious news here. Some of the new emails that are coming on out. Have you noticed all of a sudden there's a lot of different individuals who are leaking emails? Apparently security over at the DNC and everything really was insanely weak. And all these different groups are putting out these emails. And one of the revelations is that the White House has been working together with the Clinton campaign to try and somehow keep this email server scandal under control. They failed miserably, of course. But remember when this scandal first broke and Obama was out there saying, I had no idea. I only learned about it from the TV news. Then we find out that he was using the server to send emails to Hillary. He was using a pseudonym to conceal his identity. I mean, it's just completely ridiculous here. Now, some of these emails have revealed that CBS's Face the Nation agreed to White House demands not to ask Secretary of State John Kerry about the Clinton emails. That's their point of maximum vulnerability. Because there's the Title 18 violations, there's the danger to national security, there's this image of recklessness, carelessness, complete disregard for proper procedures, and if I'm correct, there's an espionage scandal behind that. And so the White House, when John Kerry was going to go on Face the Nation, the White House demanded and got a total ban. They were not going to ask John Kerry about those emails. Other emails are revealing that the Clinton Foundation has been in regular contact with comedian John Oliver, the host of Last Week Tonight. And when that show first came on, I enjoyed it and I DVR'd it. But when it became very obvious that he had this pro-liberal, pro-Hillary bias, I canceled it from the schedule, and I don't think I've watched it in months now. But apparently he was just out there a willing pawn for the Democrats and for Hillary. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And let's take a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. On Syria, did you see from Geneva, Switzerland, the guy in the UN saying he's going to walk with the terrorists out of Aleppo if they agree to this,
and it was a brilliant move, because the entire U.S. position for Russia and Syria to stop bombing the U.S.-backed terrorists is that they're destroying the city of Aleppo. And this UN envoy to Syria has said, okay, we're going to move the U.S. terrorists out of Aleppo to some place that bomb craters look good on, and let them mingle with the other terrorists, and the people trapped in Aleppo are ready to get on out if there's a safe passage. Russia's already said, we're perfectly okay with this, and that leaves the United States totally stuck, because the United States didn't care about Aleppo. They just wanted to protect their hired thugs, their phony terrorists. And there's nothing they can do now except a direct invasion, and apparently that's still going back and forth in the White House.
Yeah, because now, if the terrorists decide not to leave, the Russians can bomb. If they do leave and go to Idlib, they're never going to make it to Idlib, because they cannot let these people leave armed or just leave and come back, because they need to be knocked out of here.
I disagree. I think Russia will keep to its word. And they will leave these people untouched if they leave Aleppo, and yes, they're going to be allowed to take their weapons with them, and go to Idlib. And once they're in Idlib, of course, it's going to be a whole new ballgame, but I don't think they're going to be attacked on the road, because Russia is trying to maintain the high ground here. Of course, there's a very alarming report that the U.S. is now painting the aircraft they're using in Syria to match the Russian colors. Now, this isn't going to fool the pilots who've got electronics and identification friend or foe systems, but the U.S. could send their aircraft to bomb these terrorists on the road to Idlib and then say, oh, it was Russia did it. Russia's the bad guy here. Because that's the only reason to paint your aircraft to look like the Russian aircraft, is you're going to do something to blame on Russia.
That's true. I don't know what the actual official range of the S-300s, or the S-400, because the S-300s are, I think, in Tartus. The S-400 is more toward the center of the country, but I don't know what the range is of that for them to pull that off. You know what I mean?
Well, you mean Russia shooting at these aircraft bombing the terrorists on the road? I don't know that they would do that. Both Assad and Putin are still trying to find a way to avoid a direct head-on confrontation with the United States. And it really has come down to whether or not the U.S. can come up with some kind of a justification or an excuse that the American people will buy to continue this war any longer. And here's the problem Washington, D.C. faces. Hillary might indeed steal the White House. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit more in the show here. But here's the problem. She can start a war with Iran. She can start a war with Russia. She can start a war with China. She's going to lose them. Because go back to your Sun Tzu and the art of war. For a leader of a country to prevail in war, there are about 7 things that they need, 2 of which apply here. 1, you have to have a military that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will fight as hard as they can and, if necessary, die. And you have to have a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will suffer the hardship that war brings even to the winning side. And the U.S. government has neither one of those. There's a big stink over there in Syria where all these U.S. troops realize they're there to support and protect Al-Qaeda, and they're not at all happy with that.
Mike, one more quick thing. You had a caller yesterday. He's like, nobody will ever be able to drink from the river. Or Lincoln made that quote.
Yes.
Because we're such a superpower. But the war, it's already over because it's the art of fighting without fighting. It's the Chinese already are, our creditor. We're a debtor nation in the history of the world. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. And you know what was really sad about it? Prior to Reagan being in office, we were the world's largest creditor nation. And the 12 years of Reagan, Bush the Elder, with all the spending on the military, took us from being the world's largest creditor nation to the world's largest debtor nation, and the debt has been growing ever since. It's completely and totally out of control, and that's why they think a new world war is their only option.
Yeah, people don't... I got to reiterate this again. China used more concrete in 3 years than we used in, 100.
Oh, they're building. They're building like crazy. They have pre-built entire cities that are still unoccupied. But they built them saying at some point our economic model says we're going to need a population in this area to serve this new industry, and they're just building the stuff like crazy.
Mike, they built the size of a city of Houston once every month.
Yes.
I want people to think about that. The size of the city of Houston once every month. So, they're the next, Eurasia is, we talked about this before, 1984, Eurasia is the future, the West is declining.
Yes,
That's
it
a
is.
fact.
Just like the fall of the Roman Empire, too much debt, too much corruption, too much infighting. All right, well, Dustin, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, Trey Gowdy, even though the FBI investigation is officially over into the email scandal, Gowdy is saying there's reason to have yet another investigation. Mostly, and he's framing this very cleverly, that we must have confidence in the FBI the morning after the election, the morning after the inauguration. And, of course, that's a big problem. I mean, we had James Comey out there saying, we're not weasels, we're good guys. You have to go back to thinking of us as the good guys. Well, anybody who's my age who went through COINTELPRO and who went through what I went in 1994 knows the FBI are not the good guys. They're the American version of the Gestapo. But basically, Trey is pointing out, all these immunity deals that Comey was handing on out effectively blocked any investigation into just who it was who gave the order to use BleachBit to erase those server drives. And he's got another reason to be wondering what the heck is going on, because at one point in the FBI investigation, they had 14 banker boxes of the paper copies of Hillary's emails. You need to remember, when Hillary finally turned the emails over, she did not turn them over in electronic form in order to prevent people from doing a rapid electronic search. They printed out hard copies, deforested, huge amounts of land with all the wood pulp, and they turned over 14 boxes of paper copies of the email. Unfortunately, it's now down to 12. And it's just like that smoking gun email about the insider trading. It's just disappeared and nobody knows where it is. We lose things around here occasionally, I mean, it's so obvious there's a massive, massive cover-up going on here. And I think it's because if I am right about Hillary selling secrets to foreign governments using her weak email server to deliver and her charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments, that is a scandal that would bring down the entire federal government. And if you look at how hard they're protecting that whole email issue and the foundation, and if you look at how nobody in the corporate media will even address this issue, this possibility, and it's a legitimate question to ask when you remember the 1996 Chinagate scandal, it's obvious there's something there that is the most protected point right now. All right, let's take a phone call. Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Not too much, Mike, but this is a clear path for Trump to the White House. All he needs to start doing is designating, do you want World War III? Do you want war with Russia? Vote for Hillary Clinton. If you don't want to send your children to war and you don't want millions of your fellow countrymen to die, vote for Donald Trump. That's the clearest, baseline.
It is a point he needs to be making. It is a point he needs to be making because at this point, the majority of the American people understand all of these recent wars were started with lies. Saddam's nuclear weapons, Assad's sarin gas, on and on and on. And, Hillary is playing to an audience she thinks has been successfully convinced that Russia's the enemy. And if you talk to people around you, they're all saying, no, Russia's not the problem here. The U.S. is the obvious aggressor here. And, yeah, a vote for Hillary is going to bring about nuclear war because the U.S. cannot win a conventional war against Russia and or China, especially if they team up together. And that means on the day when the U.S. government realizes they are losing conventionally, they will resort to the nuclear weapons. That's how dire this situation is.
Yeah, and I would like to think after Iraq, the population would be a lot more wary, would ask a lot more questions, and not throw their support behind faceless lies as they did in 2003. So that card may have already been played as far as, manipulating your way and lying your way into war. So, yeah, I think if Trump can draw that distinction, that voting for Hillary is voting for war, that's an easy path for him to the White House.
Well, in an honest election, yes, absolutely. But in an honest election, there'd be no question Trump is going to be the next president. But the vote fraud is rampant, and we're going to be spending some time on that in a little bit. I hear a small person in the background there.
Yeah, this is my little 11-week-old.
Oh, congratulations! My goodness, a lot of new babies. We've got two neighbors here. One about 6 weeks ago, the other one just 2 days ago, and oh man, lots of little kids. I grieve for the world that we are leaving to these little tiny ones, but they're always fun to look at and poke in the belly and make weird faces at.
It definitely raises the stakes for me. So
yes.
All right, Mike. Well, you have a great weekend. I appreciate everything.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, Alex in Florida. How are you holding up under the hurricane, and what's on your mind?
We're handling the hurricane okay. Thankfully it didn't come directly to where I'm at. Anyway, I just wanted to say if we do go to war on bogus pretense, I think that it needs to be clear that every single American needs to be responsible for contributing to the war. That means if you need to volunteer 40 hours a week at the VA or work 30 hours and volunteer 30 hours, we all need to do it together so we all understand what it is, and so that everyone looks at it with an open, clear mind to see if there is a legitimate reason to go to war. That's the only war we need to fight, is where every single one of us goes to fight it.
Well, I think
where we get.
I think this idea where people should volunteer for the VA or any kind of veteran services, that's a good one. That's going to be your Buddha on the road moment when you actually have to confront the real human cost of these wars of conquest. And really look at it. I mean, the U.S. government tries to sanitize war. They try and make it look like a giant open-air Nintendo set, and it isn't that at all. Did you ever see this classic movie called All Quiet on the Western Front? That's a really good example because it starts out with the schoolmaster telling his students about how great it will be to run off and fight the war, and then those who come back try and get in the school to tell the kids, no, they're lying to you. Anyway, Alex, got to let you go. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines because I got a bunch of stuff to get to. Tom in Minnesota, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael.
Yeah, seeing where Rothschild was talking apparently to the American government, hinting that there's plenty of Russian oligarchs that are ready to take care of Putin there. And I was just wondering how many of those oligarchs are Ashkenazi and have dual citizenship.
Well, I don't really know, but I mean, basically, Rothschild is arguing for a regime change in Russia, and we know that that was actually under consideration because Putin caught them at it and he kicked all these non-governmental organizations out.
And the Rothschild bankers.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a gray area. He kicked out a lot of the money junkies, but Russia's central bank is still privately owned, but it's under government control. And, of course, the day he did that is when Russia went from being good friend to the top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list.
Yes. I was wondering if you ever looked at the diseases of the Ashkenazi.
I understand that there are some that are unique to that gene pool, but then after all, they're the chosen people.
Right, but they're not unique to the Sephardic or any other Jewish subset, and nor to their cousins, the Arabs. They do not exist amongst those people, but just amongst the Ashkenazi.
Okay, well, that's an interesting piece of information. Anyway, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to close the phone lines for a bit, because I got a lot of stuff to get through. Now, one of the articles we posted to WhatReallyHappened.com today is called Must Read of the Day. I listened to a Trump supporter, and it's written by a Hillary supporter, or at least a liberal. And it starts out with the usual thing about, the Trump supporters, deplorable, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes on to say, I actually talked to this person and came to the realization that everybody who's supporting Donald Trump, these are America's wounded. These are Americans who worked hard, played by the rules they were told to play by, and they've all gotten damaged by it. And there was that other article we put up the other day where Donald Trump represents a giant middle finger by the American people to the establishment, and that's really what it's all about. And we even have some of the leaders of blacks and women and Hispanics saying the problem is the Democrats are always making these promises. It's never been done. And there's no reason to think they're going to keep their promises now, and there really, really isn't. But there are a lot of wounded and angry people in this country who have been gratuitously harmed by this money junkie, drug money corrupted system, and they're angry. And the election is their way to try and get back in control, which is why, if it does in fact wind up being stolen, they're risking an outright revolution in this country. Now, Megyn Kelly is actually coming on out and starting to poke fun at Hillary for all the recent exposés showing that these so-called spontaneous moments to show what a warm and wonderful person she is were all scripted and planned ahead of time, poking fun at the fact they had a professional child actor as the supposed randomly selected girl to ask a question, and this actor's father happens to be a Democratic politician. And so Megyn Kelly basically came on out and said, and the Oscar goes to, and yeah, it's all facade, it's all illusion coming from the Hillary Clinton campaign. It's all marketing, it's all PR, it's all advertising. It's impossible to see the real Hillary Clinton. All we get are these little glimpses from people who've actually worked with her, when there are no crowds to watch, when there are no TV cameras going on. And remember, character is how you behave when nobody's watching you. Now, having learned absolutely nothing from calling Trump supporters deplorables, Hillary Clinton herself, we got the video, has encouraged her supporters to conduct what she calls interventions on anybody who's thinking of supporting Trump. To silence them, to shut them down, to keep them from talking about Trump. And Hillary just encouraged her followers to violate Title 18, Section 594, which says coercion of anybody to change their vote is punishable by a year in jail. Hillary doesn't care about the law. We'll be right back. And And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And following on the comment I made about Hillary's campaign is nothing but facade and salesmanship and public relations and manipulation. There's no real substance there. You've probably seen this pro-Hillary spot that was put together by Steve Golan, where he got a whole bunch of celebrities from Leonardo DiCaprio to Julia Roberts to get on there and tell young Americans you've got to register to vote, and then they go on about gun control and social justice and saying we're all immigrants and all this other nonsense here. And on the YouTube where it was posted, it's gotten almost 4 times as many downvotes as upvotes. This thing has blown up in their face. And somebody else put together a satire video called Thank You Famous Actors. And you've probably seen that all over, where it's the same cutting style, back and forth, a lot of people going on in there and saying, if it wasn't for the famous actors, I could have made a horrible mistake, and voted for Donald Trump. Thank you, famous actors. And they're just, ribbing them, and it's very, very funny. And they hit some of the key points that need to be hit. Who hasn't accidentally hit the delete key on their keyboard 30,000 times? Now, as you know, one of the pro-Hillary PACs is called Correct the Record. And it's run by a guy who's just got this long record of propaganda and media and spin and the rest of it. And basically what it is this is a hired team of people that go on out and try and shout down anybody who's criticizing Hillary Clinton. If you mention the email scandal or Benghazi or the Clinton Foundation or pay for play or any of this stuff, these people will jump all over you. Well, as it turns out, over at the Federal Elections Commission website, and we did provide a link, they're all named, along with how much they're being paid to be online trolls. Now, I'm sure this isn't the entire workforce, because the people who are doing the actual cyber hacking, I'm sure they don't want their names and out there where anybody can find them. But these are the people who, for 30 pieces of silver, are willing to sell out the American political system. Now, over at Monmouth University, they do a lot of polling, and it generally tends to be fairly accurate. And somebody just leaked out an email from last September. Whoops, we just... okay, somebody's trying to call in, and we'll do that. Let me change my little status to Do Not Disturb. There we are. Probably some marketing research caller or something like that. So anyway, we're over at Monmouth University, and last September, somebody whose name is being withheld at this point sent an email to Patrick Murray, who's the director of the Monmouth University Polling Institute. And apparently, it was saying that you need to change the narrative. And they mentioned this very strange phrase about a control agency. An internal memo leaked from a control agency to the Monmouth polling group, ordering them to change the narrative. Because according to Monmouth's polling data, Hillary Clinton is losing to Donald Trump. So somebody, we don't know who, was attempting to tell Monmouth, you change what you're doing to make her poll numbers look better. We already know the corporate media's been doing that. They openly admitted, we're changing our methodology. And they have been caught running their polls in a way to make it look like Hillary Clinton is at least hanging on by her fingernails, if not ahead. They oversampled Democrats 2-1 over Republicans. That doesn't match the demographic breakdown in the United States. They're oversampling women, or they were, until Hillary started losing them. They were oversampling blacks until Hillary started losing them. It's all fakery and fraud. Now, over at Investment Watch blog, they have a story about how a Syrian Kurd is calling out Hillary's supporters and saying, I'd rather put a bullet through my skull than vote for the woman who's helped engineer the deaths of my family and countless other innocent lives. And last word from Hillary's supporters was, we can arrange that. All right. Now, the reality. And again, we're going to polls that are not connected with the corporate media, because corporate media is totally on Hillary's side on this. Donald Trump is now leading Hillary Clinton by 7 points in Iowa, 2 points in Colorado, and these are formerly blue states. Trump is up 13 points in Georgia. In an honest election, he would have a landslide victory. But this is not an honest election. Over in Texas, they found yet another massive election fraud underway. And they called this one vote harvesting. And what it is the vote riggers, the criminals, let's call them what they are. They're criminals that are trying to steal your country from you. They order mail-in ballots using the names of people in target districts. And then they have some of their operatives go door to door with these ballots. They knock on the door. Whoever's living there answers. They give them some kind of a story about their collecting signatures on a petition, and they get them to sign that little carrier envelope in which there is the mail-in ballot, which the perpetrators have already filled out supporting Hillary Clinton. And apparently this is massive. The Texas Attorney General is trying to corral all this stuff, get it out of circulation. And it's all over the country. Article over in WorldNet Daily. Voter fraud much more widespread than Virginia and Pennsylvania. Dead people and illegal immigrants are being registered to vote all over America, and a lot of these dead and illegal immigrants have already voted in the early voting states. And amazingly enough, even though this is major story here in the independent media, the corporate media has not even breathed the word election fraud. There's no election fraud in America. It's just a wacky conspiracy theory. Now, the Clinton camp is out there acknowledging that on election day itself, Hillary's probably not going to do very good. But they're not worried, because before election day, they will have already won with the early vote in the swing states. And they go on out there talking about the massive number of Democrats who have mailed in their ballots in these critical swing states. And they're telegraphing how they plan to steal the election, the early voting, where the dead and illegals are already voting by the thousands. So why is something not being done by this? Well, we had a caller early in the week who brought up this mention of a consent decree, and I did a little bit of digging into it, and I was just stunned by what I found. And Still Report did a segment on it. We have that link to WhatReallyHappened.com. And I am not kidding you. Apparently there was a lawsuit a while back that hamstrung the Republicans from pursuing vote fraud allegations against the Democrats without their prior consent, if you can believe that. And when the Republicans tried to appeal this and get it dismissed, because it's obviously one-sided, unfortunately, the case was handed to a judge that had just been appointed by President Obama, and he not only rejected the dismissal of the thing, he made it worse. This is literally a legal license for Democrats to steal elections. This is absolutely absurd, and you would have to wonder, the Republicans have to know, this is a big problem. This is what's keeping them out of the Congress and the White House. Why didn't they get behind Donald Trump and get a Republican president and a Republican Congress so that they could reverse this law and have laws regarding election fraud that are equally balanced in both directions? Well, there's another theory out there. Well, it's not really a theory. Remember this latest batch of emails that came on out that prove that members of Congress were getting kickbacks from all the financial institutions that got those TARP funds. The money flowed from your pocket to the pockets of the Wall Street money junkies, and the money junkies, to show their gratitude for Congress for helping them rob you, gave some of it back. And the money was pouring in on both sides of the aisle. And that may be why they are also united against Donald Trump, because if Trump becomes the president and this becomes an issue, He's not going to sit still for this. He's not going to cover it up. Remember that picture when TARP finally passed and you got Barney Frank there and Nancy Pelosi, and they're all laughing and smiling and grinning like crazy because they had just made out like bandits, and I'm choosing that word deliberately. You got robbed. You got robbed first by the banks in the mortgage-backed security fraud, and then when it all fell apart, you got robbed again by the Congress to keep the banks going. And then the banks, in their infinite gratitude to the Congress, took some of the money they got from you and gave it to the members of Congress. It was a kickback. Plain and simple. And that's why they're all united against Trump. Because it's all surviving on corruption, fraud, deception, hoaxes. And it's all going to come down under Trump, and that's why we have to get him in there. We have to overcome that vote fraud. The Republicans may be legally blocked for investigating election fraud, but me as a private citizen, I'm not. I gave up party affiliations a long, long time ago, and by the way, that's becoming a majority opinion. Now, apparently a Twitter user by the name of Hispanic for Trump is out there pointing out that after he did a post about fact-checking statements made by Kaine during the vice presidential debate, Facebook deleted his account. They're not even trying to hide the fact that this has descended into a dictatorship. If you're not saying what the government wants you to say, you will lose your Facebook account, you'll lose your Twitter account, you'll lose your whatever else it is you've got here. And by the way, you should be shutting off your Yahoo accounts. We'll be talking about that later in the show. Now then, President Obama announced yesterday he's going to commute the sentences of another 102 criminals. Most of them are cocaine dealers. Meanwhile, of course, Mumia Abu-Jamal is still sitting in prison, dying of hepatitis C, because the prison authorities won't get him the medication. And Leonard Peltier is still sitting in jail for a murder that most people don't think he actually committed. So who was Obama letting go out of jail? Drug dealers. Why did Obama destroy our relations with the Philippines? Because he didn't like the fact that Philippines are shooting drug dealers. Remember what I said about the narcocracy? There it is. It's on full display. Now, more and more people are beginning to pick up on the duopoly I've been talking about. Article out of newswithviews.com, where they're out there saying, yeah, this whole system was set up going all the way back to the 1980s and that whole Iran-Contra scandal and all that cocaine money floating around with which to buy and bribe their way into the highest levels of the government. And it was supposed to be Bush, Clinton twice, Bush Jr. twice, almost Hillary, then almost Jeb, then Hillary, blah, 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 and on and on. That's the plan. Two dynastic ruling families powered by drug corruption. That's what is running our country. And everybody's dipping into it. And that's why they're all terrified of Donald Trump. And I'll tell you who they should be terrified of. We, the American people. Because nobody is going to believe that Hillary won that election honestly if they declare her the winner by imperial edict. And that is going to make the domestic situation much, much worse. I would like to avoid a bloody revolution in this country, but I'm running out of reasons and arguments against it. Now, getting onto the international scene, Paul Craig Roberts is out there raging. That's his word. Washington is leading the world to war. We all know it. We all see it. Paul Craig Roberts, former White House staffer himself under, I think it was Kennedy. He's an insider. He knows what's going on here. Story coming out of Kaahumanu.com. The new blitzkrieg. U.S. generals spoke about a future war against Russia and China, saying that it'll get out of control. It'll flow very quickly. Enormous sacrifices. A lot of people are going to die. There's not going to be any way to stop it once it gets going. But for them, this is a good thing because they're all going to get promotions and kickbacks from the defense contractors. So that sort of makes it all okay and worth it. Do you remember the original movie MASH? Donald Sutherland, Elliott Gould, and there was the character of Colonel Potter. And every time he made a speech, it always began with, "In the dark days before Pearl Harbor," and I really didn't understand what that meant. And I had the opportunity to work with him on another project later, and I said, "What does that mean?" He says, "Well, because before Pearl Harbor, nobody was getting promoted. There was no money to do anything, and we were all just sort of sitting around in the uniforms," and that's what Potter meant by that, because with Pearl Harbor, everybody was getting promotions. Everybody was getting money. That's how they think. Story coming, well, this is over at the New York Times. They're already preparing you for war with Russia. And this article is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. It comes on out with this huge accusation that Putin did this and Putin did that, and we was all the rest. And then halfway through he says, "No, you didn't miss the story. I made it up." And then he goes on to say, "It's okay for us to make up lies about Putin because it's so important we get the war going." The New York Times is actually suggesting that it's okay for the government and the media to lie to you in order to get the war going. What a ridiculous idea that is. Now, as the U.S. goes on rattling their sabers, Russia is considering reopening military bases they had in Vietnam and Cuba. That is really going to ramp up the tension. And meanwhile, we're seeing this story coming out of Sputnik News. U.S. bombing Syrian army again would start World War III. We're on a hair trigger. This thing literally could happen at any moment. I know our government is trying to find some way to hold it off till after the election, because starting a new war is going to help Donald Trump and hurt Hillary Clinton, because we, the American people, are sick and tired of wars. We're sick and tired of the cost of wars. We're sick and tired of seeing our kids come home crippled or in those cheap metal boxes draped with American flags made in China. We've had it. Enough is enough is enough. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And a very alert listener wrote in to remind me that Paul Craig Roberts was Assistant Secretary of the Treasury under Reagan. He's not as old as I originally made him out to be. And another listener wrote in to tell me that the reason the corporate media is overpolling Democrats is to adjust for the fact that the dead can't answer telephones to take part in these polls. So, my mistake. It's all very benign and very innocent on the face of it. All righty. Now then, getting back to the war zones. Tehran has issued a warning to Saudi Arabia, which is in the middle of a Persian Gulf war game exercise that is, of course, running right up to the border with Iran. And Iran is very much aware that Saudi Arabia is, at least for the moment, acting as a U.S. proxy in Yemen and possibly the rest of the Middle East. However, U.S.-Saudi relations have been strained by JASTA and the continuing attempts to frame Saudi Arabia for 9/11. And I'm sure the Saudi Arabian leadership is realizing they're being set up, that their loyalty to the United States for all these years is one way, and that the U.S. government will turn on them in a split second if they see any gain to be had. Now, the other day we were talking about how Britain's defense industry is really, really large. It's, I think, second only to the United States in terms of international sales, and they're not being very careful who they send the weapons to. And human rights group War on Want is out there saying that Britain is arming repressive regimes in the Persian Gulf. Yes, they are, and so is the United States of America. The U.S. government likes repressive regimes. They're trying to create one here. They're sick and tired of all this freedom and nonsense, the democracy nonsense, you know. We want a country where the people just do what we tell them to do. Stop giving us all this grief. Article coming on out from the Daily Sheeple, how the U.S. armed Syrian jihadists, and we know that's been going on, but the important part of this article is they're talking to some of these military on the ground who were assigned to train the so-called moderate rebels, only to see the moderate rebels take their weapons and training and go over to ISIS and Al-Qaeda or Al-Nusra. And the trainers are now fed up with this whole situation. It's amazing here. Another article, this one in strategicculture.org, U.S. soldiers resist Obama's support of Al-Qaeda. Remember what I said about Sun Tzu. Your military must believe in the moral rightness of the war. And all these kids were recruited and put into uniform and trained because there's a war on terror and the enemy is ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And all of a sudden they find out they're actually working together in a war of conquest and greed. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Hello, hi America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 2. And we're still going to close the phone lines for a little while longer because I got a lot of stuff to go through. Interesting little article that came out of The Intercept. A lot of good stuff over at The Intercept. And the headline is, to sell weapons, defense contractors make war seem fun. And they're talking about how when you go to these defense company conventions, they've got all these simulators and all this other stuff that you can play with, and you can play it being at war and combat. And we're seeing that with a lot of the computer games that are being put out there that make war look like it's fun and glorious and glamorous, and hey, you never really die because you can hit that reset button, but real life doesn't have a reset button. You go on out there into somebody else's country to steal their wealth, and you get an arm blown off, it doesn't grow back. There's no reset button that brings it back. And again, I love that caller in the last hour. You should all take a moment to just pay visits to people who are in those VA hospitals or in other veteran support groups and take a look at them. Especially those of you who are parents who have children approaching military age. Now then, over in Israel, a gentleman by the name of Naftali Bennett, he's the education minister and the leader of Habayit HaYehudi, is out there saying that we must give our lives for the cause of annexing the West Bank to Israel. It's our dream of a united, and he goes on about from the Nile to the Euphrates and everything. So that's his next thing. We must give our lives for the annexation of the West Bank. Okay, Naftali, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. Here's your Dayglow jumpsuit. All right, we're going to go ahead and open the phone lines here. Ken in Georgia, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike?
Yeah.
Hello, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah, hey, Mike. Sitting here in Georgia, out on the coast, hurricane's heading up the way towards us. I'm here. My wife's already up in Atlanta with our daughters. Because of my job, I can stick around. Might get called out later tomorrow.
Okay.
But I didn't call you up about the storm. Yesterday, I think it was last night's show, you were talking about ordnance in the Middle East and how maybe people are, they're shipping lots of ordnance over there and who are they selling it to and all that.
Yes.
Okay, what I was calling about is this. I got a good friend. I've known him since the 3rd grade. You and me are the same age, okay? So that's all. I've known him that long.
I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, it's all I can do to get up and to sit down. But anyways, this guy's been doing this for well over 10 years. He works on a ship. And it's all civilians on this ship, and it's not just one. There's many, many, many of them. Mm-hmm. And they leave the West Coast, and they go to the Far East and the Middle East with ordnance, tons and tons of it. And that's all he does is he goes back and forth, and they're bringing ordnance, and then on the return they bring back what's old moldy ordnance, I guess you could say, that's, stuff that they say is no longer maybe going to go off.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible. Just a little side note, this guy, he's been, he was in Vietnam when he was 17. He celebrated his 18th birthday in Vietnam. And mm-hmm. He was a Huey, on a Huey UH-1 machine gunner. He was just a kid. And he's done so much crazy stuff in his entire life, but he said this is coming back across the ocean with old ordnance. He got caught in a typhoon, and he said it was the first time in his life he thought he was going to die. He was on the ship, and it was doing one of those things up and down the waves and, coming up, and you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
And he finally got to L.A., and he flew back to Tampa. That's where he lived at the time. And he got into Tampa, got ripper drunk, passed out. When he finally woke up, that's when the last hurricane hit Florida that hit land. And you can check it out. It hit Tampa. And he was there. He woke up, and he was like, where the hell is everybody? And so on. But anyways, what I'm getting at is this. So they're taking all this ordinance and they're bringing it back. My two questions for you is this. First question is, I've been alive in this country as long as you, and I've only met one person in my life. He worked for Lockheed down here at Kings Bay, Georgia, because of the sub base down there, something to do with the missiles that those subs, I don't know, the nukes or what, but he did something with them. Other than that, I've never known anybody in my entire life that worked at a place making munitions. So where's all the stuff being made? Who makes them? And what are they getting paid? My second question is this. Like I said, for 10 years he's been doing this, maybe longer. Where are they taking all this old ordinance and putting it? What are they doing with it? And I'm going to shut up.
Well, I know that there are ammunition makers here in the United States of America, and right now the federal government is buying pretty much all of it. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about the war zones. And I know that there's been a lot of pressure to end the production of civilian ammunition in this country, but nobody's put any dampers on military-grade ammunition. As far as what they do with the old ordnance, I would presume that it can be recycled to a degree. The brass can be recycled in the casings and so forth. So I have to be very honest. I don't know how long a bullet lasts, what its shelf life is, assuming it's kept, in proper storage. But yeah, at some point, you can recycle the metal in the actual missile itself, the shell. Obviously, you have to be very careful about those primers because I do know that fulminated mercury becomes very unstable after a while. But I assume there's some reason to bring it back, or they would just dump it in the ocean like they did at the end of World War II. We got all kinds of stuff from World War II dumped in the ocean around Oahu.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm glad they're not dumping this. He's talking heavy ordnance, not just rounds, but heavy stuff. I don't know, man. It's just amazing to me when you mentioned it yesterday on the show and just hit me in the head, and I was like, wow, what are they, all the stuff just shiploads and shiploads and shiploads of this stuff being shipped out of the country.
Well, they may be rotating the stockpiles. They're obviously rotating the stockpiles. They want all new shiny stuff ready to go when World War III breaks out.
That's my feeling. They've been stockpiling lots of stuff. And Mike, I got one last. This is goofy, I like to kid around too, and did you hear that the Clintons just got 2 more endorsements?
No, but then I'm not paying attention to the Clintons all that much these days.
Well, the 2 endorsements they got was Fat Albert and his wife.
Oh, somebody's looking for a presidential pardon.
Yeah,
I'm sure Bill's going to be very sympathetic to Bill Cosby's plight.
Yeah, he's in a mess, and he needs to talk to Bill. Bill knows how to get out of this stuff.
Well, unfortunately, Cosby doesn't have quite the political pull that Bill Clinton did. But his brand is damaged. He's never going to come back from this, even if he winds up staying out of prison or the rest of it. Nobody's ever going to look at him the same way ever again.
No, he's real old. It doesn't really much matter at this point. It's like, why are they bothering with the guy?
Well, and anybody who writes a check can get in there. I still have this photo from Bill Clinton's presidency of Hillary Clinton posed in front of the White House Christmas tree with a known cocaine smuggler, Jorge Cabrera. And he got to go into the White House and get his picture taken with the First Lady because he donated $20,000 to the Clintons. And I've never been to the White House. I'm not really all that enthusiastic about going. I'd love to visit Washington, D.C. A lot of great museums there, I understand.
It's awesome. Yeah, you need to go. Hey, this is a true story. Now that if you got time, I got to tell you this.
Okay, you got to make it quick, though, because we got other callers holding.
Okay, years ago, probably Clinton's first term, where I'm at, we got a lot of military, and I had businesses at the time. And the guy working with me I was moving one place to another, and the guy working with me I says, can you help me out? I got to move all these showcases and stuff. And the guy says, yeah, can a friend of mine come? And this friend of his helped us out, and he had just re-enlisted to get out. I'm not making this up, to get out of the White House. He was an honor guard up there, and he said that Clinton was okay, but he said this, I'm not making it up, and this was before anybody even knew who she was, that Hillary Clinton was a monster, and that everybody wanted out of there. And I mean, at the time, I never thought she was going to be a senator or anything like that. I just like, wow, another nutty first lady. But this I was told, like, in probably, I don't know, I think it was his first term. And this guy re-enlisted to get out of the White House because of Hillary. And I'm not making it up.
No, I'm not surprised. We've heard it from a lot of people who were White House staffers back then. Hillary has a temper. She loves to throw things, especially ashtrays. And apparently the White House maintenance crew had a regular job of going around patching the holes in the walls. So this is somebody...
He said that she hated the military and she just cussed them out every chance she could. I mean, used the choice words at them. And same thing with the Secret Service. I mean, really, there have been some books that have come out by Clinton insiders from Bill's term in office, and it paints a very, very unflattering picture of Hillary. This is a very dangerous psychology that's inside that skull, although it may look like Swiss cheese by now. But, furious temper. She could wind up turning the keys on the nuclear weapons just on a delusion, especially if she has Parkinson's. Yeah, Swiss cheese is better. I'll see you, Mike. Take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to go to Mary in New Jersey. Mary, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hi. I wanted to say, for all those Hillary supporters out there, or Bernie, who are thinking of that, I don't think they're aware that if we do go into another World War III, Congress passed last year that they're going to reinstate the draft, and if we have a war, and young women will have to register for combat services.
Actually, they took that part out. It drew such a negative reaction. They took that part of it out. And I know the feminists are screaming discrimination, discrimination, but ordinary women are saying, whoo, I'm so glad. And they've had the bill for bringing back the draft sitting in committee for years now, waiting for an opportunity where they could pass it without a serious outcry from the American people. That's not going to happen. It doesn't matter what lies they tell. It doesn't matter what false flags they pull on off. The American people are wise to what's going on. We don't want another draft. We want our children kept home here safe. If the Wall Street money junkies want to conquer some other country and steal their wealth, let them go do it.
Yeah, and because I'm a female, I don't think it's discrimination. That's ridiculous. They used a few people to try to make that case. Anyhow, and what the other guy would say, I used to be a Democrat. I guess I was still registered, but 20 years ago I heard Dick Morse, their campaign manager, talking about her violent temper and how horrible she was, and through the years I've heard other people. So I used to feel supportive of them, and what her husband did when the embassy was bombed, they bombed Bosnia. They were also involved in the drug running to Mexico and gun and drug running. I mean, they're just money hungry. She's just a total psycho. And I read a book about this. My daughter told me to read it. It's called The Psychopath Next Door.
Yes.
And this woman, the woman who wrote the book, she is a psychiatrist at Harvard, and she's been studying this for years and years and years. And she said it's like 4%, but she gives a perfect picture. And like some of these doctors on TV, like Dr. used to say, the different, on the edge of psychopathy or something. But really, the difference is they both do not have consciences. The only difference is that they find it expedient for them to kill. They can easily kill. There's no difference.
Well, the only difference is sociopaths are still relatively connected to the real world, and the psychotics are not.
On the edge.
You know, I mean, there used to be
according to the psychiatrist, they both do not are not able to. They can imitate emotion. They can learn to imitate it, but they do not know how to actually feel. So when they get into positions of power, she gave some illustrations of, doctors who were head of departments or head of a whole hospital. Some of the damage they could do is unbelievable.
Well, it is the curse of political power that it attracts the very people who should not be allowed to have it, and that's why when this country was designed, power and authority were distributed uniformly across the country at all levels. This country was designed to not allow a single central tyrannical ruler. Unfortunately, we were foolish enough to let that slip away. Mary, I got to let you go here because we've got John in Barbados waiting on the line here very, very patiently. John, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I want to step back to yesterday's show right at the end where I made some certain statements, and then Mo from Florida came on. And he was saying America is too big to be, powerful to be invaded. But I want to point out to Mo, you already have been invaded. And they're coming across that southern border. And not only that, this quiet coup being organized by this administration and Hillary Clinton is likely to change the outcome of your next election. Think on that one, Mo from Florida, because it's happening.
Okay, now let's not get into a wrestling match on the air here. What else would you like to share with us? We're almost on a commercial break.
Okay, well, this nonsense coming out of the military and these generals and what have you on the news. The latest one, the army general, was quite offensive. I thought, we're going to crush you, and this is nonsense. Because, are they really saying that this common cold Jello generation of snowflakes that they're trying to rely on will make a real effort to join the military? They're kidding.
Well, even if they draft him, we've got a generation of young people that have been raised to cower in fear when they hear a bad word. And the other half of the population, of course, are all these refugees and illegal immigrants who are being promised citizenship if they'll join in the military, but they're not an effective fighting force. They don't have an emotional connection to this country. They're going to cower in the foxholes, serve out their time, and come on home. And this idea of gender-neutral society where men aren't allowed to be men anymore, it's proven to be very, very hard to build an effective fighting force out of that. Our government, as a result, is relying on the high-tech whiz-bang weaponry, and that was a strategic mistake also made by the Third Reich. I'll give you a good example. The drones, which are out there, they're having a huge problem retaining the drone pilots, because these guys are sitting in these air-conditioned trailers somewhere in the middle of Nevada, and they're with their little joystick, and it looks like a computer game, but they know the targets they're blowing up are real live human beings, and they're not convinced these people did anything deserving of death in this manner. And there's been a huge turnover rate. That's why they tried to come up with a medal for being a drone pilot, which everybody viewed as this incredible joke, because these drone pilots, they're not at risk. The worst thing that can happen is they lose their drone. What happens then? They get another drone.
Well, Michael, the thing is, they're losing drone pilots, but they're losing drones to electronic countermeasures almost as fast. I can't remember now how many have been taken down over Crimea. This is, the number is
and Iran. Iran is just plucking those U.S. and Israeli drones out of the sky, and they're starting to copy them.
Yep. And, so this superiority of American weaponry ain't there, boy.
No, it isn't. It isn't. So, the Syrians have been getting around U.S. countermeasures by using carrier pigeons. There's no way to deal with that unless they start teaching falconeering to the U.S. troops. Anyway, listen, John, I'm going to have to let you go here. We've got a commercial break and a bunch of calls waiting and a bunch of news before Claire joins us in hour number 3. So we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the phone lines again because I'm falling way behind on the talking points. Dan in Washington State, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking the call. It got me thinking you guys were talking about Bill Cosby, but I've noticed some of these celebrities, when they say politically incorrect things, they seem to be kind of getting set up or taken out of the picture. Because I know Michael Jackson's last video, and he was starting to get critical of Jews running Hollywood and stuff. And then Bill Cosby said something about AIDS being manufactured.
Same thing with Dolly Parton. Same thing with Dolly Parton. She was making a comment about Jews running Hollywood, and that was the end of her Hollywood career, and she retired to Dollywood and the rest of it. And yet you have people like Ben Stein writing editorials saying, yeah, the Jews run Hollywood, there's nothing wrong with it, and nothing happens to him. And, of course, in my case, it was virtually an accident. I saw where this photo leaked about Vince Foster was clearly staged and a fake, and I talked about it, and boom, my career in Hollywood was gone.
Wow, it's really scary. I wonder sometimes if they get these guys addicted to drugs and stuff and actually kill them sometimes,
I don't think the government has to work at getting some of these people addicted to drugs. I mean, the stuff is just flying all over the place. It is a trap. There was this one company I worked for, and I'm not going to say who it was. There was actually a drug dealer in the building, and it was a line item on the production. If you'd come on in and there's a little pile of cocaine on the desk, it meant that sales had made an impossible promise, and you were going to be there 24 hours a day for the next several days to deliver on the unrealistic promise. And it just went in the budget under some line item or something. That's how completely wide open it was back then.
All right, thanks for taking the call.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now then, back to the F-35, or as I like to call it these days, the Fireball F-35. And you have to be my age to get the reference to a kid's show, Fireball XL5. But this is the Fireball F-35. Bloomberg is reporting on its latest problem. Part of the whiz-bang engineering of the F-35 is it uses its own fuel as a coolant. And it's not a new idea. Rocket engines are kept from melting by circulating the fuel around the outside of the combustion chamber, and that preheats the fuel and it makes the fuel burn more efficiently. So it's an idea that's been around for a while. But the F-35 is using its own fuel as a coolant, not just for the engines but for the electronics. There's a slight problem. If the fuel in the wing tanks is already hot, then the plane's electronics will shut down rather than overheat. And it's proven to be a real problem in areas that are a little bit warmer because the fuel coming out of those fuel trucks has been sitting in the truck on the runway for hours. It's very, very hot going into the wing tanks. And so they've been trying to figure out a way to solve this problem. They tried to paint the fuel trucks bright white to reflect more of the sun's heat away and keep the fuel cool. Unfortunately, that makes the trucks easy to spot. It makes them very obvious targets, and it just runs around in circles. All these modern whiz-bang weapons are very poorly designed. They're very expensive. They look very impressive sitting on the runway, but that F-35... It's turning into be the biggest boondoggle we've ever seen between exploding engines, the insulation in the fuel tanks flaking off and getting into the engine itself. Now the fuel problem, they still don't have the software for the onboard cannon, the helmet control, the fire control system, $400,000 for every single helmet, that still doesn't work. I don't know if these are just Common Core graduates who are building these things or we're paying the price for creating so few jobs in this country that all the people who really know how to design, engineer, and manufacture have already gone to other countries. And we've just got the leftovers, people that the other countries didn't want, and that's who are designing our weapons with which we're going to fight and lose World War III. All right, real quick, there's the music. We're going to take another break for commercials, talk about the economy when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to be talking about the economy now. Right now in New York, the rate of homelessness has reached the highest level since the Depression of the 1930s. I'm not going to call it the Great Depression because we've gone past it in terms of the massive unemployment that's going on in this country. Or we can call that the almost Great Depression, this sort of wannabe Great Depression. But we're in a bigger one now. Maybe we could call it the Grand Depression. That would put a politically correct positive spin on it. Anyway, the U.S. economic growth has been downgraded to the largest single-year drop seen for an advanced economy. This is coming out of the IMF. Even the IMF is saying the U.S. is now in serious, serious trouble. Now, you need to remember something about that word growth. It sounds like it's positive. The economy's growing. What that really means is the way the economy grows is because more people and companies are going to the banks to borrow money at interest for various economic endeavors. When they're talking about the economy growing, they're talking about an increase in the total aggregate debt. Now remember, private central banks are essentially giant Ponzi schemes. They only continue as long as there's always more and more borrowing to prop up the old borrowing. And so when the growth stops, when people stop going further into debt, the whole system is under threat. And that's what they're really talking about. Now, Deutsche Bank is in serious, serious trouble. In a lot of people's eyes, it's already on death watch. They're now realizing that if Deutsche implodes, they can't bail it out. It's no longer a question of whether they will or won't. They can't. Germany certainly does not have the money to bail out Deutsche Bank. The entire European Union doesn't have the money to bail out the Deutsche Bank. Deutsche is in trouble because until they come to some firm resolution and agreement on that $14 billion fine from the Department of Justice, Deutsche can't raise new capital. They're firing off people and closing branches. They're trying to cut costs to stay ahead of the dwindling reserves they have. And that's a big race. When Deutsche collapses, even exchange-traded funds are at risk because of all these derivatives that are out there. So Deutsche Bank, of course, is now facing further litigation down in Italy for engaging in basically concealment of debt. The same thing that Goldman Sachs did with Papandreou in Greece. They're cooking their books. And in fact, a lot of people are saying that what Deutsche Bank did in Italy is going to wind up being as huge as the Enron disaster. And there was an excellent documentary about Enron called The Smartest Guys in the Room. If you haven't seen it, hunt it down, take a look at it. We're just now getting word that the Swiss Central Bank is about to post an annual loss of 23 billion francs. That's 1 for 1 against the dollar. So it's $23 billion due to foreign exchange transactions. And actually, that's a flashback article, but that was earlier this year. But it underscores something that I was mentioning before. Even if there is some way to save Deutsche Bank, it will leave Europe economically exhausted and unable to deal with the next bank that implodes, and that's likely to be Credit Suisse. So here are the current numbers. There are 94,184,000 legal American citizens willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for months and in many cases years. And still the U.S. government insists the unemployment rate is only 5%. Those people who haven't been able to find jobs for months and years, they don't count anymore. We don't count them as unemployed. They're in another category so that we don't have to look at them, especially in an election year. Now, again, going back to the IMF, they're raising concerns over the fact that right now global debt is at an all-time high of $152 trillion with a T dollars. All because of that very simple mechanism called private central banking, which by design creates more debt than money with which to pay the debt. And the debt grows and grows and grows until it crashes the system. And something that really bothers me, there are still a lot of people walking around Wall Street and Washington, D.C. who just are saying, it doesn't really matter, the debt doesn't matter, as long as we've got liquidity, as long as we can just create new money out of thin air, everything's going to be just fine. No, it isn't. It's a naturally unstable system. Private central banks are not designed to operate forever. They're designed to make their owners and creators very, very rich, and some future generation down the road pays the price for it, as we are doing now. The people who created the Federal Reserve knew what was going to happen. They were going to become very, very rich, and they were going to go to their graves happy after a lifetime of wealth and comfort and privilege and power and influence. And they went to their graves happy, because they know this whole thing about you're going to go to the dark regions and devils will poke you with pitchforks is a bunch of nonsense. And what was going to happen to future generations? They could care less. They could care less. Now, do you remember that whole situation a while back about the Panama Papers? And a lot of people are saying, oh, Panama's a tax haven and who was caught in there? And a lot of people were looking and saying it almost seemed like it was a leak. And there's a very interesting theory that's going on out that somebody wanted to destroy the tax haven in Panama to lure those customers to another tax haven here in the United States of America. And so there's this article that came on out from mountainvision.com where the author is relating about how he got a call from a banker asking about if you'd like to help soliciting European investors and wealthy families to move their wealth to the U.S., which is now offering tax havens to foreign nationals. Not to you, the American people, of course. The U.S. has become a huge tax haven. If you're rich enough, if you're wealthy enough, you're famous enough, but ordinary Americans, oh, no. Taxes are for you little people. That's your place in society to pay for it all. Now, the French Senate is getting ready to urge the European Parliament to lift the anti-Russian sanctions that are up against a fight with Germany, which even though Germany's economy is hanging by a thread from the Deutsche Bank collapse, is still out there saying we want open borders and refugees and we hate the Russians, and still fully on board with the New World Order. But France and many of the other European countries have suffered tremendously under these sanctions, cutting off markets. Remember when the French farmers were literally dumping tons of rotted food that they couldn't sell in front of the French government buildings as a protest? Government should just leave people alone to do business, not get on out there and say, we will tell you who you can sell to and who you can't sell to. We'll set the prices for you. We're in control here. Another little article coming out from over in deviantinvestor.com, reducing things to their simplest elements. Inflation, the simple explanation is it's theft, and it really is. Every time they crank up the printing presses over at the Federal Reserve, or they just type in a bunch of numbers in the computer, it makes the money that is already in your pocket, the money you've already traded your labor for, the money you've got buried in the mayonnaise jar out by the pineapple plantation, it's worth less. It buys less. Inflation is just another mechanism to take real worth and value away from you and give it to the money junkies. Because when they're creating all that new money, they're not handing it out to ordinary people. It goes to Wall Street. to prop them up, to make it look like things are working. It's like over on Wall Street, one of the offices has Lord Voldemort in it, and he waves his wand, and real worth, real value, wealth, vanishes like magic from your pocket and appears in the pockets of the Wall Street bankers. That's what it is. And that's why it is ridiculous, all these people saying, the amount of debt doesn't matter, we can just create all the new money we want and inflate the debt away. Well, you can't even really do that, because the way it's set up, all new money creation represents yet another loan at interest. And that is why the debt always exceeds the available money supply. It's designed that way, to trap the nation, its government, and its people in hopelessly unpayable debt, so that the bankers can use that awareness of debt to control you, to enslave you. Rule by compound interest. Now then, over at King's World News, Andrew Maguire is talking about the recent gold takedown. And he's saying this could actually backfire violently on Western central banks, because too many people know what's been going on with the rigging of the prices. And by the way, gold prices are headed back up again. Speaking of all these government meddling and so forth, another article coming out of IntelliHub, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership would lock in the sky-high drug prices we're all paying for medications. Now, remember the good old days when we had this idea of competition between companies, where they would be motivated to come up with better products at lower prices. And today, the U.S. government is moving away from that. Government-mandated high prices, protected industries, especially the vaccine industry. And that, too, is an evil of fascism. Now, do you remember back when Obamacare was first starting on out, and President Obama was speaking before a joint session of Congress saying that illegal immigrants would never be eligible for Obamacare, because a lot of people were very concerned that the illegal immigrants were going to avail themselves of Obamacare at the expense of the legal American citizens. And it was so outrageous that during that speech before the joint session of Congress, South Carolina Representative Joe Wilson shouted, "You lie." Well, turns out Wilson was right, because California's Governor Jerry Brown, who's out there mandating vaccines and gun grabbing, has allowed California to apply for a federal waiver to open Obamacare in California to illegal immigrants. We live in a country where those who are working are being looted and plundered to buy votes from those who just come here across the border and sit and collect things. Somebody sent me an email, supposedly originally from Jeff Foxworthy, talking about just how upside down our entire society has become. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. James in Northern California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm glad you're talking about this. I called earlier in the week, Michael. I'm kind of convalescing at home here.
Well, I hope you get better.
Thank you for that. This is what I want to say. The thing that people a lot smarter than me don't get is this. This is a deliberate thing. Nobody's this flippin' stupid. I mean, look at the trade policies that Trump is pointing out. The highest tax rate in the world, corporate tax rate. And, you know, what did Obama defund and neuter in the wake of the biggest expansion of government in U.S. history? The Small Business Administration. These people know exactly what they're doing. And it's not a left or a right thing. This is like a betrayal thing. And it's working.
Well, I know there's a lot of people who are saying that the economic destruction of the United States is a deliberate plot. I think really it's accident and stupidity and self-centered interest, and too many people still believing in Adam Smith, who came on out and said it's okay to be personally very greedy because everybody being greedy for themselves moves the entire system forward. It's complete and utter nonsense. John Nash proved that in his doctoral dissertation. But nobody wanted to listen to John Nash because they wanted justification to go on being personally greedy and driving big fancy cars and have $100,000 wristwatches on their hands. And I think it's this idea where everybody's looking out for themselves, the me generation, and they think that somewhere in the background somebody's keeping an eye and will keep it from going out of control, but nobody is. And that's where it's going to go.
We've adopted UN Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, which almost by definition is about bringing us to our knees. And, the handlers don't want to remodel. They want to build a whole new structure. So if we ask any out-of-work contractor, they'll tell us that there's demo involved. And I would suggest that what we're witnessing is the carefully orchestrated civil, moral, fiscal demo.
Well, they're being a little premature because in order to enact the New World Order and global government and Agenda 21, they're going to have this war with Russia and China. And right now, the main player the New World Order people have against Russia and China is the United States. And so this would be a very bad time for them to crash the economy at a time when we need our industry and our workforce intact in order to supply the material for prolonged conventional conflict. Afterwards, maybe. But again, I'm seeing too many self-destructive, contradictive phenomenon going on. There may be somebody who thinks it would be a good thing, but I really do think that the majority of what we're seeing before us is just greed run rampant, an absolute denial of any sense of personal responsibility for what's going on, and it's just gone to an extreme. Just like bad money drives out good money, bad government drives out good government, and our government's gone totally bad, and we are all seeing the effects of it. Anyway, we're coming up on a commercial break. James, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're getting word that Congress is considering a new mandatory voter ID law to deal with the growing scandal of votes being cast by people with no ID. And the way the law is being proposed is Republicans will have to show their birth certificates, while the Democrats will have to show their death certificates. So that's how they're going to deal with that problem. On a more serious note, today, the Obama administration has officially accused Russia of carrying out a campaign to interfere with the 2016 elections, meaning they know Hillary is about to lose, even with all the election fraud. And so it looks like their plan K is to say, Russia did this. Donald Trump, nobody likes Donald Trump. Nobody voted for Donald Trump. Russia did this. We've got to invalidate the election and have it again. So they get another try to steal it. This is the entire corrupt establishment fighting for its life. There is nothing they will not do to cling to power, to go on with their war agenda, to go on plundering your pockets and sending your children off to be killed and crippled. Nothing. That's how bad it is. That's how corrupt it is. These people do not believe in playing by the rules. For one thing, they've already been embarrassed by saying Russia did this and Russia did that. Remember when the NSA tool hack came on out? They said, oh, it was obviously by Russia. Turned out to be another NSA contractor. They're still blaming Russia for the Democratic National Committee emails. Julian Assange all but identified Seth Rich as the origin of that. He implied it very strongly. And Julian Assange flat out said, no, it did not come from Russia. This is a crock. All right, I'm going to try and get a couple of phone calls in here, but at the top of the hour, we're going to be shutting off the phone lines for the Lady Claire. Brandon in San Francisco, aloha, what's on your mind?
Mike, I'm just going to advise Trump on his tactics for the debate. He needs to simply speak to the people, not get caught in this Anderson Cooper spin, and just go, listen, folks, do your homework. The facts are out there, America. Just invest a half an hour of your time and go research. Forget fact checkers from CNN. I'm telling you the truth. These folks are up to no good. They're trying to drive this country into the ground for a global takeover, and just speak clearly and concisely to the people. Forget Hillary's even there. Forget Anderson Cooper's even there. People get it. He just needs to make a clear message. And the other thing he needs to say is, look at all the waste, fraud, and abuse that's going on around us. There's enough money in this country to get us back on track. Very simple.
All right, well, thank you for that. It's good advice. Pat in Vermont. Aloha, Pat. What's on your mind?
Michael, I'm trying to answer a question at the end of your show yesterday. Gentlemen wanted to get the quote I tried to give to you and John. I think he confused me with the Aaron for, talking about the perpetual motion machine, and you were yelling, Pat, no, stop it.
All right, well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Pat and Mark, I'm going to apologize. We're going to have to drop you here. We're closing the phone lines for hour number 3, and we'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM Music TV, the gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who's been absent from the show these many weeks, and I'm glad to have you back.
Well, I'm very happy to be back. Thank you so much.
So what's the first thing you want to talk about?
Well, the first thing I would like to talk about is more than a little unsettling, and this comes out of Sputnik News, which is a very sober Russian news resource in English. Apparently, the Pentagon is now at the helm of American foreign policy. There is a Canadian-based political analyst, Usama El-Motar, who was talking to a Sputnik interviewer and commenting on the disruption of U.S.-Russian cooperation on Syria. And according to El-Motar, this is really dangerous, Mike.
Well, of course,
really
it's very dangerous to have the military in charge of our foreign policy. That's why the Founding Fathers set it up. Only Congress is supposed to be able to declare war.
Right.
And then the President, as the executive branch, goes to the military and says, go do the war Congress just told us to do.
Yeah, but that doesn't seem to be happening.
No, and there's a lot of people who are still thinking when the U.S. attacked that Syrian army position that the order did not, in fact, come from the White House. And we certainly have Ash Carter acting like a loose cannon on deck. He's out there screaming for more war almost as much as John McCain is.
Yeah.
They're just frothing at the mouth. They think war is going to solve the economic problems, or at least give them something to blame for it in order to save their own hides from an angry American people.
Yep, definitely. And I'm very concerned if the internal polling numbers for the DNC in the White House appear that Trump is going to absolutely wipe the floor with Hillary Clinton in this election, that's going to accelerate the push.
Yeah, it is. Over at the United Nations, in dread of a Trump presidency, they're rushing through that Paris Climate Accord to try and have it a done deal and ratified before Trump can take office. And yes, if it does look like Trump is going to have a landslide victory that can overcome the election stealers, then yes, I expect the war party will get our hot war with Russia going before the end of the year.
Yeah.
And they're going to stick Donald Trump with World War III the way the Wall Street bankers stuck President Hoover with the Depression of the 1930s.
Right. There is another interesting email exchange between former White House Communications Director Jennifer Palmieri and Jennifer Psaki. And apparently they were plotting to avoid a swirl of questions about Clinton's email server. And so there were emails going back and forth, and they were trying to figure out how Secretary of State Kerry could avoid the swirl of questions from the media about Hillary Clinton's private email server. The Wall Street Journal was shown the emails by the Republican National Committee, which was obtained from them with an FOIA request. And Palmieri emailed Psaki asking if it was possible between us on the shows, think we can get this done so he is not asked to talk about email? But Psaki agreed, adding that she was working to crush the story from her position at the State Department. Good to go on killing CBS idea, Psaki wrote a day later. And we are going to hold on to any other TV options just given the swirl of out there. According to the Journal's report, the pair was apparently discussing an upcoming appearance by Kerry on CBS's Face the Nation. Oh, yeah, we believe that it just honestly was never really taken off the table, right? True and free speech and hard questions coming from corporate media outlets like CBS. Michael, in the immortal words of Tony Soprano, forget about it. This is how they work.
Yeah, it is how they work,
yeah.
And it is such a dangerous situation right now. And, of course, we're concerned because right outside this window here, we are about 2.5 miles away from a first-strike nuclear target. And we're going to see the rubble bounce. I mean, we're seeing the chiefs of staff and Ash Carter, and they're abandoning the previous policy of no first use of nuclear weapons. They're talking about just authorizing a nuclear strike against Russia. I mean, that's as crazy as it gets.
Absolutely. And speaking of crazy, Kerry is now calling for war crimes probes against Russia and Syria. And what he said was Russia and the regime owe the world more than an explanation about why they keep hitting hospitals, medical facilities, children, and women, Kerry said before a meeting with French Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault. These are acts that beg for an appropriate investigation of war crimes, and those that commit these would and should be held accountable for these actions. They're beyond the accidental now, way beyond, years beyond accidental. This is a targeted strategy to terrorize civilians and to kill anyone and everyone who is in the way of their military objectives. Well, Secretary Kerry, I've got a statement for you. The Saudis and the Brits and Americans who have sold them the weapons owe the world more than an explanation about why they keep hitting hospitals, medical facilities, children and women in Yemen. These are acts that beg for an appropriate investigation of war crimes.
Well, what Kerry is trying to do is a variation on the Assad is gassing his own people.
Yeah.
Because right now the policy in Washington, D.C. is if at first you don't succeed, lie again.
Right.
And, you know, they have absolutely no proof. It's out there. They're treating like it's a done deal and everybody should know it, and now we have to have war crimes investigations. But Assad came on out the other day with some extreme common sense. How does it help us to be bombing civilian targets and hospitals and schools and the rest of it? And just like the case with the claim that Assad was using sarin on his own Alawite supporters, there's no motive for him to do it.
Yeah.
It's just another one of these lies trying to start a war or justify a war. And before I let you continue, we need to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network even now. So it is insane. And I guess part of the problem is that this government has gotten by with lies, fraud, and deception for so long, they don't know any other way to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so every time they lie and they get caught, they'll back off for a couple of months, and then they'll figure we've all forgotten about the previous lies, and they'll come out and lie again. But it doesn't work that way anymore because the Internet and the independent media have produced a collective memory for humanity that is not time-dependent and not filtered by the state-controlled schools or the state-controlled media or any of that. We do remember we were lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons. We do remember we were lied to about Assad using sarin on his own people.
Right.
And so we've got absolutely no reason to listen to or believe or trust anything coming out of Kerry's mouth.
No, he has absolutely put himself in a situation where no one can believe anything he says anymore. You know, he's lost whatever credibility he ever did have.
He may not even care. He's out there playing the diplomatic game that when the U.S. attacks Syria directly and Russia, they're going to say, well, we were justified because they were doing this and they were doing that. And the fact that nobody believes him is irrelevant. As long as in their minds they can craft a justification for more war, they're going to go ahead and have more war.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. And bobbing on over to another spot in the Middle East that's getting almost zero coverage except with the independent media. Yemen is being starved to death. And apparently there was a CNN reporter on Yemen who, by the name of Peter Salisbury, who made the statement, basically policymakers in the West see the world as a gigantic game of risk, and they see more value in maintaining their relationship with Saudi Arabia than getting rid of bad PR over Yemen. But meanwhile, Mike, the humanitarian catastrophe in Yemen is about to get worse. With food ships finding it hard to get into Yemen's ports due to a virtual blockade by the Saudi-led coalition that has backed the government during an 18-month civil war, over half the country's 28 million people already do not have enough to eat, according to the UN. Yemen's exiled president, Abd Rabbu Mansur Hadi, last month ordered the central bank's headquarters to be moved from the capital, Sana'a, controlled by the Houthi rebels in the north, to the southern port of Aden, which is held by the government. He also appointed a new governor, a member of his government, who said that the bank has no money. Now, the U.S. and UK, in their enabling of Saudi Arabia to bomb civilians in hospitals and schools with impunity and starve the country, are complicit in war crimes. Mike, that's it. Period. End of discussion. And when I was writing an article about this, I mentioned that here at What Really Happened, we are paying attention and bringing these Saudi war crimes into the light of day. And what I did, and normally I don't like to do this, but I felt a point needed to be made. Many of the people who listen to the radio show and read the blog have kids. And I put up some of the most awful examples I could find of dead Yemeni children, courtesy of this bombing of Yemen. I find it absolutely immoral, and I put a caveat out. I think all Americans and Britons need to understand what their government is allowing to happen in Yemen, and they need to start asking some very uncomfortable questions to their alleged representative governments about why the U.S. and UK are enabling the Saudi government to commit these acts of genocide in Yemen. Because it's absolutely horrific.
Well, it is a campaign of terror. I mean, we have seen before where our politicians love to play projection. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is they're doing, oh no, it's not me, it's the other side. We've been seeing Hillary Clinton do that with Bernie Sanders and then Donald Trump. And basically John Kerry is out there saying, no, it's them who are doing the campaign of terror and genocide. But that's exactly what's going on in Yemen. Mm-hmm. Because the people of Yemen are trying to drive out their U.S. puppet government. And the only way that they can stop that, because it is a true grassroots movement, they have to go in and kill civilians. This is no different than when the U.S. Overthrew the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende in Chile in 1973, then sent in the CIA to train Pinochet's death squads on how to go on out and maximize the fear of the people so that they would sit there and accept their U.S. puppet ruler.
Yeah, looking at some of these images, it's really enough to make you weep. It really is. And children all over the world are innocents who deserve protection from all people. And I find myself very upset and very angry at what the U.S. and the UK have done. And, it's the UK that gave the world the Magna Carta. And they're behaving like this now? But I guess it's all for the profits of the defense industries.
Well, and for the bankers. And for the No, the bankers drive it. Okay. The bankers love war. Mm-hmm. War is the bankers' richest harvest of debt. Right. And again, there was that wonderful movie, The International, which is talking about a bank that's sort of loosely based on the BCCI bank scandal, where they're out there trying to control this production and distribution of small arms in order to be able to control the debt conflict produces, because that is the real value of a conflict, is the debt it produces for the bankers. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'd like to bop over to another part of the Middle East, Israel. The U.S. is admitting that Israel is building a permanent apartheid regime weeks after giving it $38 billion. The Obama administration has continually protected Israel with unstinting loyalty and lavished it with arms and money. This rewarding of Israeli behavior culminated in the administration's announcement just 3 weeks ago that it had signed a memorandum of understanding to significantly increase
the amount of money the U.S. gives to Israel every year, even though Israel was by far the biggest recipient of U.S. aid. And under this agreement, the U.S. will give Israel $38 billion with a B over 10 years, by far a new record for U.S. aid commitments, even though Israeli citizens enjoy all sorts of state benefits that Americans whose money is being given to Israel are told are too costly for them, including universal health care coverage, and tout superior life expectancy and infant mortality rates.
Mortality.
Infant mortality.
Yeah, I mean, that's a joke. Israel doesn't need the money.
Yeah.
It does not need the money. It's got a very high standard of living, but what they want is the weapons with which to make war on their neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
They want to grab the Golan now permanently because of the oil and gas underneath it.
Right.
We were talking about that gentleman earlier about how we must give our lives to annex the West Bank, and of course you can bet he won't be out there on the front lines for that one.
No.
It's all about greed and conquest run amok, and ordinary people are just there to be used and sacrificed. You're a commodity. It's like that story yesterday where even though the VA has the resources to provide a decent burial to veterans who die of their injuries that they receive in the war zone, they're just piling them up in the morgue and letting them rot away.
Yeah.
You're being thrown in the trash. They'll grab your kids, train them, send them out to conquer other people's wealth, and if they get killed in the process, then just throw them in the trash bin. There's plenty more kids coming around.
And, you know, I have to ask myself, I mean, I really had kind of a palm-to-forehead moment at warp speed reading this, and I have to ask, Michael, just what did President Obama and Congress get from this incredible largesse? And the short answer is absolutely nothing.
They got AIPAC's blessing to stay in office. They got Israel's permission to go on being president and members of Congress. And that's worth all the money they need to take away from you.
And did it persuade Israel to become a signatory to the NNPT, which Israel has signed on to, Iran has signed on to, by the way, permitting its nuclear facilities to be inspected? Heck no.
That would be silly.
And yet, all these people who passed on this legislation for this aid package understand that not one dime of aid to Israel is legal under the Symington Amendment, which prohibits any U.S. financial or military aid to be given to countries which have nuclear capabilities but refuse to sign the NNPT. Well, Israel is a nuclear-armed country which refuses to sign the NNPT. And they signed off on this aid, while our veterans, as you just mentioned, can't get care through the VA. Homeless camps, Obamaville, let's call them, in the U.S. are growing exponentially. And
Obamaville. Yeah, I like that. There's a possibility.
Yeah.
I want to make a point here.
Yeah.
AIPAC, of course, should be registered as a lobby of a foreign government. It isn't. It gets all kinds of special exceptions. But AIPAC was fully on board with this JASTA bill to just arbitrarily, by imperial edict, blame Saudi Arabia for 9/11 and use lawfare in the American courts to plunder Saudi Arabia's wealth. To the point where Congress not only overwhelmingly voted for the original bill, they voted to overturn Obama's veto. And, of course, the first thing that happened, now that the U.S. set the precedent that war and terror void national sovereignty or sovereign immunity, first thing that happened, Syria is now suing the U.S. government for war crimes. Iraq is suing the U.S. government for war crimes. And members of Congress are out there saying, well, we had no idea this was going to happen. Well, that's because you didn't think about it. Israel calls up and says, here's a campaign donation, vote for this thing. And I hear and I will obey my masters in Tel Aviv.
I love the smell of irony in the morning. And essentially, what President Obama and Congress have done, they have allowed Netanyahu to what they have allowed Netanyahu to do collectively is the geopolitical equivalent of him having relieved himself in your faces and telling you it's raining. And the U.S.
Boy, the pollution really is out of control with the rain.
The U.S. government enabling of Israel, which has become in the 21st century a wretchedly apartheid, self-proclaimed theocracy with nuclear weapons, does not augur
really bad attitude.
Yes, for peace. And it's also demonstrated clearly to all the other leaders of the Middle East that they can't believe anything that this government says ever again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And these are dark times. And I got to tell you, when I was a kid, if anybody had told me, you will live to see the United States behaving like this, I would have said, no, my teacher at school told me this is the greatest nation on earth. We don't do that kind of thing. We have to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm looking at the corporate media right now, and they're running the story about how John Kerry is out there demanding that Russia and Syria be investigated for war crimes. I think the U.S. government is overdue for a serious investigation of war crimes. And there's the banner headline at the bottom, Russian aggression, Russian aggression. Yeah. Russia is not the aggressor here. Russia didn't invade Iraq. Russia did not invade Afghanistan. Russia did not invade Yemen. Yeah, Russia did not invade Libya. Russia hasn't been trying to get rid of Syria's government for the last 5 years. We all know who the aggressor is. Yes. Mr. Kerry, shut the heck up because you're angering me. I'd use stronger language, but the FCC would come in and take away.
I know. Let's not go there. And I've got a story that dovetails into what you were just saying.
Or hawktails in this case.
Despite Russian warning, U.S. considers hitting Assad. Officials for the U.S. State Department have repeatedly talked of quote-unquote non-diplomatic solutions recently in Syria. Though they're trying to be coy, what they're actually talking about is overt military action against the Syrian government, attacks that would threaten Russian forces embedded with them, and likely drag Russia into a shooting war with the U.S. Russia's defense minister was quick to urge caution, noting that they had recently deployed air defense systems into Syria specifically to counter the threat of a U.S. attack, and that the U.S. should carefully consider the consequences of launching such strikes. And the State Department acknowledged that they were aware of the Russian warning, but insisted that the internal discussion within the United States continues on the non-diplomatic options, which is to say, starting a war with Syria. Spokesman John Kirby added that there would be no discussion with Russia over the matter. And Mike, just because an action is the most pig-headedly, ham-fistedly stupid thing that the U.S. government could do is unfortunately no guarantee that the U.S. government won't do it. And for the U.S. government to say that they have the right to attack a sovereign nation and not allow the military of that sovereign nation to clean out rebels and jihadists there and return the city to order, that looks to me like complete, sheer geopolitical madness, and I feel like I personally need to apologize to Russian President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov for the utter stupidity and hubris being demonstrated by the U.S. government right now.
Well, see, here's the problem. Since the end of World War II, the U.S. has justified all of these interventions around the world on this idea that the United States is now the world's policeman, which is an idea that has not really been accepted by every other country on the planet, but that's always been the policy. And the reason they're out here talking about war crimes right now is because if they are planning an attack on Syria, it's going to be sold to you, the American people, that we have to save the poor Syrian people from the evil Bashar al-Assad and the evil Putin.
Responsibility to protect.
Yeah, responsibility to protect them. And it's nonsense. Yeah. It's nonsense. It's complete and utter nonsense. This is another war of conquest. The U.S. has been in Syria for 5 years trying to get Assad to step down so they can put in a puppet government. And this is classic brinksmanship. They're thumping their chest and they're getting ready to launch the war, and they're literally betting the future of our entire planet that Russia is going to back down. I don't think it's going to happen.
Vlad is not a backing down kind of guy.
Well, Vlad has been a very good statesman. He's gone out of his way to not trigger a direct confrontation with the United States. The same thing with Assad. But you shouldn't take that care and caution and use it to assume that when the U.S. directly confronts Russia, that Putin will back down. I don't think he will.
No.
I don't think he will. He can't afford to.
Yeah, and the leadership of this country is already mired in unwinnable wars in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and Yemen, and yet its appetite for even more carnage appears to be utterly undiminished, Mike.
Well, I think part of the problem, in addition to the realization that Donald Trump may be able to overcome massive election fraud. Especially, we're seeing all these stories where the authorities in the states are cracking down on the election fraud. They're not Republicans. They're not being blocked by that consent decree.
Yeah.
Ordinary Americans can go on out and do something about the election fraud, and that consent decree doesn't apply because we're not members of the Republican Party leadership. We're not constrained by it. And, they're just going to crank the war up and stick Donald Trump with it. The other part of it is they have to get the wars done quickly because they understand we, the American people, are really fed up with all of this.
Yeah.
Okay? Remember, war is when the government tells you who the enemy is. Revolution is when you figure it out for yourself. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. And please don't call because we're closing the phone lines for the rest of the show so that Claire and I can do what Claire and I like to do. What is it you want to talk about now?
Well, I wanted to talk about this coming November's election as the war drums are beating incessantly and the U.S. economy, it looks like it could slide off a cliff any day now. We cannot stand idly by and allow for business as usual, which I believe is what Hillary Clinton represents to win.
She does. She represents a third Obama term.
Yeah.
And I think Susan Sarandon said it best. Susan was being interviewed, and, you're a woman, so you're going to be voting for Hillary Clinton. And Susan said, no, I'm not. A vote for Hillary Clinton is a vote for the status quo, and the status quo is not working, and that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Are you happy with the way the nation is being run? If so, vote for Hillary. If you think it's time to change course, then you have to vote for Trump.
Yeah. On the one hand, we have the lying, hubristic sociopath, Hillary Clinton, who will lie, cheat, and steal with impunity to get what she wants.
And kill.
Yes. And the Clinton Foundation's pay-to-play contributions demonstrated just how clearly that worked. And on the other hand, we have Donald Trump, a self-made millionaire, who understands how things get done. I consider him practical and someone who will show restraint in international relations and will be far better for this country than would Clinton, who most probably will get us into more horrific wars by the end of her first year in office. Now, do I love everything that comes out of Trump's mouth? No.
Nope.
He is not perfect, and he will occasionally come across like a blunt instrument. But he does speak his mind. And, Mike, I think he's got the innate intelligence to learn quickly, ask the right questions of people who can bring him up to speed in the areas where he doesn't have expertise.
He can think on its feet, and that's something Hillary Clinton demonstrably cannot do.
No, absolutely
She's got to be
not.
reading teleprompters in the podium. She's got to have voices and radios in her ear.
Yeah.
She's got to have, all the stuff rehearsed and memorized. She can't think extemporaneously, and that's why all these moderators in the debates do everything they can to prevent Donald Trump from asking her a question for which she does not have a prepared answer.
Right.
And, again, I don't agree with everything that Donald Trump says. In my opinion, his bluntness is part of his attraction.
I can see that.
We've had decades and decades of politicians who are euphemistic, and they believe in social justice, and they want to use gentle language on certain things. I think it's time for somebody who just comes on out and says what they mean. And the bottom line is you cannot have freedom of speech and an offensive-free society.
Yeah.
No matter what you say, somebody's going to be offended by it. Even if what you're saying is the absolute truth, those who are threatened by that truth will be offended. So at this point, my attitude is go ahead and be offended. Nothing's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
Go away, and, if you have a counter-argument, that's fine. But attacking me or threatening me or attacking my server, that's not an adult response.
No, that's childish.
Yeah, but Donald Trump is a plain speaker. And he hurt the feelings of the illegal immigrants. You know what? Too bad. Too bad the people who snuck into this country illegally had their feelings hurt. If their feelings are hurt that bad, they should go home.
Yeah. And interesting thing, ironic actually, coming to the end of Obama's presidency. Despite his Nobel Peace Prize, Obama's presidency has been defined by constant war.
Yes, but the Nobel Peace Prize is just a complete joke at this point.
Yeah.
They just awarded it to, I think, the president of Colombia, and he got the notification right after this possible truce to end this war with FARC was collapsed.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And Obama's lack of ideological aversion to war, punctuated in a Nobel Peace Prize speech that was all about the necessity of American interventionism abroad, presaged a foreign policy track which began with heavy escalations of the Afghan war and has since seen the U.S. dragged headlong into multiple wars, like Afghanistan, which have no end in sight. You know, kids who were born in the last 15 years, that's all they've known is America at war in all these foreign countries. And the man has single-handedly set the U.S. up for even more aggressive and ferocious wars than even a George Bush could possibly conjure. And unfortunately, President Obama has been an epic fail, both domestically and internationally.
Okay, well, I'm looking at a story here that I think we should share.
Okay.
It's coming out of Counterpunch. Pentagon begins low-intensity stealth war in Syria, and it starts out with a quote from the Washington Post where they were talking about just going on in and attacking Syria, but without publicly acknowledging it. And when you dovetail that with the report that the U.S. is now painting their aircraft operating in Syria to look like the Russian aircraft.
Colors, yeah.
They're going to go in and start bombing critical infrastructure, and they're going to say, look what Russia's doing. Oh, terrible, terrible, terrible. This is as obscene as when Israel used unmarked aircraft to attack the USS Liberty. This is just outright, it's invasion, it's war. World War III is now starting, and there's not a thing that we can do about it. I'm very unhappy about that, if you hadn't picked up on that by now.
Well, honey, the one thing that we can do the best we can is take care of the people that we care about. Again, if you have not started prepping, now would be a doggone good time to think about it and get out there and get it done. Because people who have thought about it, worked the scenarios over in their mind about what it's going to be like if there are disruptions with food and water and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think they're going to have a much better chance to survive than those who have not.
Well, meanwhile, I'm showing my support for Vladimir Putin by drinking Russian vodka. A lot of it, I might add.
Oh, dear. Yeah, it's rough times, and these are the times that we have to be extraordinarily kind to ourselves and the people we love. Because, Michael, I know with you and me, it has been a very rough couple of months for peace and social justice.
It's been a couple of rough decades for peace and social justice.
But I mean,
I don't like that phrase, social justice, because that's been co-opted by the people who say it's okay for guys to use the ladies' room.
Well, but you know what I mean in a deeper sense, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That people get a chance in this lifetime to fulfill the best part of their destiny. That kids get protected. And getting back to this issue of protection, if you have children in school, please make sure that you know what the policy is if you need to get them out of school in a heartbeat. If you don't know, you're likely to get absolutely caught up with the bureaucracy, and you have to sit down and say, if there is an emergency with my family, what do I do to get the kid out of school? That's going to be important if people have to pick up and move very quickly.
You're going to have a plan, and part of that plan is going to be prepared for a disruption in the supply chain, food and water and so forth.
Yep.
And you need to take a look around where you live and see if you are near any critical military facilities, because that ramps up the risk. Now, here on Oahu, we have the highest density of military bases of any state in the entire nation.
Yeah.
And it does, unfortunately, make us a target. And it could be Russia, it could be China, or it could even be another U.S. false flag, where they drop a nuke on here and say, oh, my goodness, North Korea's attacked us.
Yeah. It's, you hardly know where necessarily something will start, but my sense is that we are heading toward an escalation.
I'm convinced we're going to be in this war by the end of the year, regardless of the outcome of the election, because either they're going to have Hillary steal the White House and she's fully on board the wars, let's get them going now, or they're concerned that Trump is going to win and they're going to start the war and stick him with it. Yeah. But, Trump could fool them. And Trump could get into the office, and his first day in office, he could call up Russia and China and say, this is a stupid idea. I think we ought to call it off. And Putin would probably say, yeah, I agree. Let's just quit right now. And that could be it, because Donald Trump is not a professional career politician, and he's not obsessed with his historical legacy to the extent that you see somebody like a Bill Clinton or a Barack Obama or a Hillary Clinton is. They dream at night of postage stamps with their faces on them in the future, and school children having to remember their names and birthdays. And I don't think Trump really cares about that kind of stuff. I think Trump, like me, realizes that there's a very low probability that we're going to be reading those future history books, so we don't care if we're in them or not.
Yeah. And when Obama talks about his legacy, what has he got left standing from his 2 terms in office, Mike? What do you think? Oh, well, there's the accomplishments of Obamacare, and they're just going to keep throwing money at that. This government can never admit failure. Yeah.
They'll prop up Obamacare the way they're propping up Wall Street with as much of your money as it takes in order to be able to go down in the history books and say, this was an incredible success. And again, nothing new with that. Politicians never admit error. They talk about the environment here in Hawaii. Nobody ever talks about the disaster with the mongooses. They were actually imported to deal with the Polynesian rats.
Yeah.
Small problem. The rats are nocturnal. The mongooses operate in the daytime. They never meet each other. And instead of 1 pest, we now had 2.
Yeah.
But nobody took responsibility for that.
Yeah. It's sort of a...
We'll blame it on that clerk over there emptying the trash can. It was his fault. His idea.
Yeah.
Take him out and throw him in the volcano.
Yeah. That whole concept of personal responsibility is something you just don't see in the political class.
I think anybody with a sense of personal responsibility can't survive in politics.
Yeah.
Anybody with a soul or a conscience, it'll tear them apart. I've known people who started to get into politics, saw what it was really like, and just turned around and got out and said, there's no way I could ever be a part of that.
Yeah. It's the kind of life that can actually eat you up if you do have a conscience. Which is why I have proposed that politicians have their conscience surgically removed before they take the oath of office.
They don't have 1 to remove. The doctor's going to be in there saying, I don't know, should be here somewhere.
Yeah.
All right, we're coming up to the end of the show here on this Friday, and what else did you have to talk about?
I have to talk about the release of a book, and the timing is just perfect. This is a book which is about Jeffrey Epstein. And it's a book about the relationship of him and Bill Clinton, and it's going to hit the stores on Monday. The publishers are betting that it is going to be out of the stores so fast it's going to make people's heads fly. Well, I'm sure all of Hillary's supporters are going to be going in there and buying 2 and 3 copies each and taking them home and burning them. Yes. The book will address how billionaire Epstein flew Clinton around the world on his private jet to speak about his charitable work, while Epstein is a registered sex offender who was jailed for 13 months in 2008 for soliciting girls for underage prostitution. The book will also examine how Clinton once praised Epstein for his insights and generosity. And especially generous with those underage girls. Yeah, it also reveals that Clinton enjoyed a cozy relationship with him at the same time Epstein abused a string of young girls. Well, that'll be very interesting. But again, the fact that Bill Clinton is a perv, it's not exactly headline news anymore. That's like saying rain is going to fall somewhere in the United States today. Yeah. But I think that the timing was very excellent in terms of when the book was going to be released, and it's going to have a nasty boomerang effect on Hillary Clinton. Well, the corporate media will either try and discredit it or dismiss it, and I think Donald Trump is right. Some of his advisors have been saying, go after Hillary because of Bill's behavior, but Trump is right. He needs to stick with the issues, the economy, the wars, and the corruptions that Hillary herself are involved in, and not try and tarnish her with the fact that her husband was out there fooling around. And by the way, the evidence is that because Bill and Hillary Clinton's marriage was for political expedience only, that they had an understanding
where they could both go out and fool around with other people, which is where this whole issue that Chelsea Clinton is actually Webb Hubbell's daughter. And again, Hillary was rumored to be having an ongoing relationship with Vince Foster, going all the way back to Little Rock days.
Right.
And there are couples who have those kind of arrangements. It's hypocritical to pretend to be a loving, monogamous couple. But it's kind of a minor point. And I think Donald Trump and the independent media, we need to stay focused on the Clinton Foundation, and we need to keep asking that question. We need to keep reminding everybody about how Bill Clinton back in 1996 was selling U.S. secrets to foreign governments in exchange for campaign donations.
Right.
And it's legitimate to ask if Hillary Clinton has been doing exactly the same thing, using that weak email server to deliver the goods and that foundation to collect and launder the payments.
That would seem to be logical. I wonder what bank she was using to launder the payments. HBSC, by chance?
HSBC, probably a whole network of them.
Yeah.
But again, the foundation itself is the laundry.
Yeah.
The money comes in marked as donation, and then it goes out somewhere else, clean and laundered and ready for use.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think that her behavior, should she steal/win the White House, is going to be any different.
No, that's something else people need to understand.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to know what Hillary is going to be like in the White House, look at what she was as Secretary of State. She's been exactly the same way for 30 years. Her entire political life, she has been this way. She is not going to change when she gets into that White House. She's going to be exactly the same person that she is right now. Along with her deteriorating health condition, she's probably going to be very paranoid, because she has to know that all of this focus of attention on the Clinton Foundation, on all of her scandals, cattle future trades, travel office firings, the bimbo eruption squad, all of that, the attention's not going to go away.
Yeah.
I mean, George Herbert Walker Bush literally had to quit the White House after one term, because the investigation into Iran-Contra kept getting closer and closer and closer to him, and he literally threw the White House away, but he threw it to the one Democrat he knew would keep the secret of what was really going on with Iran-Contra, the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton.
Yep.
And wouldn't be the first time that happened. When Richard Nixon knew he was eventually going to have to step down, he arranged for his vice president, Spiro Agnew, to be kicked out of office, and he brought in Gerald Ford. Why? Because Gerald Ford had been on the Warren Commission and would keep the secret about all that hanky-panky, as Nixon described it on the White House tapes, the Cuban thing. That was, and Gerald Ford did. He came on in, granted pardons to everybody to just shut the investigations down, because had the real story about who was behind Kennedy's assassination surfaced, it could have brought down the government. Just like if Hillary Clinton has been selling secrets to foreign governments, if that were to come out today, that could bring down the government. All right. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And turning back to Hurricane Matthew, it's down to a Category 3 storm. A little bit of minor damage has been reported at the Kennedy Space Flight Center. They're still concerned over possible damage to Disney World. And already the politicians are leaping on this thing to link it to global warming and why you must pay a carbon tax. And over at NBC, their prostitute Ron Allen literally came on out and said that the Paris Climate Accord that Obama is pushing to ratify will stop hurricanes. He actually came on out and said that. And over at PBS on their NewsHour, they hopped on in. Judy Woodruff and Gavin Schmidt pondered the interconnection between climate change, the deal, and the storm. Now, folks, first of all, warming does not create storms. A temperature differential causes storms. You can have monster storms with upper atmosphere cooling, and the proof of that is out on the outer gas giant planets that have storms the size of our entire world at temperatures 100 degrees below zero. Meanwhile, here in the real world, snow and blizzard cause traffic restrictions in Romania. Up in Saskatoon, we told you they were under a snow alert there. They broke a 100-year-old snowfall record, and it's snowing up at the Timberline Lodge. Now, a lot of people are still going over this revelation that Yahoo did not, in fact, suffer a massive hack. It was Yahoo itself scanning emails on behalf of the U.S. government, reading your emails, searching for key phrases, turning it over to law enforcement. Yahoo was scanning your mail before you even got to read it.
That's pretty disgusting.
And Yahoo was justifying what they did by saying they're obeying U.S. law. Well, Yahoo, you need to go back because there's that Fourth Amendment that is superseding all this other stuff that's coming from the government. And the Intercept is out there saying it's time to delete your Yahoo account. I could not agree more. Now, I never used it, but I did have a Yahoo account. As of today, it is deleted. And we need to start punishing those Internet companies that violate our trust and our right to privacy.
I agree.
And so I think we're all ready to be willing to live with less than to put up with this nonsense. Meanwhile, as we head into the Christmas shoplifting season, the smash and grab point of sale hackers have released an update to their point of sale malware that grabs your credit card information, so forth and so on. And where's the NSA? Well, they can't be bothered actually finding cyber criminals. They're too busy stealing pictures of our naked lovers off of our computers to pleasure themselves with, as Edward Snowden pointed out. All right, so we're coming up here to the end of the show, and again, a quick reminder, I'm unavailable to do the show next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I've got something else I got to take care of. I couldn't move it, conflicting schedule, but I will be updating the website as normal, and we'll be back live here on Thursday. Claire, is there anything you wanted to add?
I just wanted to add that now is the time for people to really start talking to people and sharing the information you get here.
Absolutely. It is so important. We have to shout down that corporate media propaganda machine or they're going to blow up our planet. There's the music. Time for us to get out of here and have yourself a really great weekend. We'll see you Thursday. Aloha, America.